Okay, when you're ready. Yeah, when you're ready, Michelle.
Okay, thanks. Hello everyone and welcome to another one of our series of chats. My name is Michelle Dixon. I'm the Tenancy Manager at Wolverhampton Homes and I'm also a member of the Equality Champion Staff Network on what will see Wolverhampton Homes continuing with our celebration of Black History Month. First, I would like to spend just a couple of minutes to say why we're here and to give a warm welcome to our colleagues at the City of Wolverhampton Council who have been invited to share in this experience and the remaining session this afternoon and tomorrow. Over the past few years, Wolverhampton Homes have had a high calibre of speakers who have shared with us quite remarkable stories about how they've overcome and challenged discrimination and what made them successful. And last week we heard from Nicholas Bailey, the former EastEnders actor, now academic, who now champions inclusive leadership and mentoring. Many have said that they don't support Black History Month because they feel that celebrating Black culture, successes and challenges for 1 month during the year is tokenistic and is a corporate tick box, and that the true value is seen in change over a 12-month period. We've had quite a bit of feedback from the first session, and a lot of the members of staff that have made reference to that have been Black staff themselves. But I would also like to say that Black History Month is about marking positive achievements and contribution of those who have helped shape our country and culture. Yes, there have been a lot in the news about Black Lives Matter, and this cannot be overshadowed, where the unearthing of facts clearly demonstrates that there is much to do to challenge bias and discrimination. I'm pleased to say that both Wolverhampton Homes and City of Wolverhampton Council have openly endorsed their commitment to the movement, and both organisations are taking positive strides forward for lasting change for 12 months of the year. We have also recently launched our new equality structure, which will further embed equalities into our organisational values. And I would advise anybody to go onto Yammer to see what this looks like and how you can contribute in taking this forward 12 months of the year. I also hope you take the opportunity to visit the Black History Month website, where you can read more about Black History Month and have a greater understanding of why learning about history and why October is so important to the Black community. With that said, Black history is about coming together and reflecting on the past, all even recent past, but also looking and searching for a positive future. I don't want to go all political here, but someone famous said 3 little words. I'll give you all a clue. It wasn't "I love you." It was education, education, education. How can we move forward if we don't learn? How do we move forward if we don't challenge ourselves? How do we move forward if we don't instill correct positive values in our young people and aim to educate others? Young people will be the adults and parents of tomorrow and our policymakers of the future. I think we have a duty and a responsibility to get this right. And although we've made some inroads, when Martin Luther King said he hopes his 3 little boys and girls were judged not by the colour of their skin, but the content of their character, we still have some work to do. Therefore, with no further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Evelyn Brown, who again has been instrumental in sourcing our speaker today, and who will introduce our guest speaker, who will speak more about the importance of education. Over to you, Evelyn.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, everyone. A warm welcome to all staff from both Wolverhampton Homes and the City of Wolverhampton Council. Thank you all for tuning in. My name's Evelyn Brown and I work for Wolverhampton Homes as a Community Development Officer. I'm currently a member of the Equality Champions Network group that has been around for many years. This year, I've taken the lead on Black History Month, as I did last year. Traditionally, Black History Month has been about looking to the past and celebrating those achievements. This year, the focus will be on how we can learn from the past in order to do things better moving forward, where everyone can contribute to enable positive change. We're here today to celebrate Black History Month with a series of inspirational speakers taking place over the next few days, which you are all invited to attend. My guest today, Denise Dalton, she's an executive head teacher at 2 primary schools, St Jude's C of E and Trinity C of E. both in Wolverhampton. Denise has worked 27 years in education and is in her 15th year as a head teacher, and she also has 7 years experience as an Ofsted inspector. Denise has had the opportunity to engage and work with different authorities and experience different leadership and educational practices, working mainly in Staffordshire and Wolverhampton. As a leader, Denise shapes and influences lives, and as part of Black History Month, she would like to talk about the leadership styles, education and support that is available for our young people and their futures. There will be a questions and answers session at the end and an opportunity for you all to post some questions. I'd like to introduce Denise Dalton. A very warm welcome to you, Denise, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Evelyn. It's a privilege to be asked to be part of this. I'm from Wolverhampton, and it's not often I'm asked to join in anything like this. So thank you, Evelyn, for recognising that. As Evelyn has said, she stole my speech actually. As Evelyn has said, I've been serving children for a long time now, and it's my 27th year in education. I am an executive head teacher of 2 primary schools, 500 children in St Jude's, 700 children in Heath Town, and that's a total of 1,200 young people, 170 staff. And then if you start to double that, all of a sudden that's 2,400 plus families, parents, carers, grandparents that we are influencing the lives of. Sometimes it's quite an overwhelming figure to think, right, that ripple effect is moving further and further out there of the influence we can have on children. As a leader, directly or indirectly, I'm influencing young people's lives. My career started 27 years ago. I was a head teacher at Whitgreave in Wolverhampton, St Jude's, and now Trinity and St Jude's. I've taught in Staffordshire for a long time, and one of my highest sort of points in my career was to be invited to Downing Street because Whitgreave became one of the highest performing schools in the country, top 100 schools. So that was quite an achievement to actually knock that big door and go in to 10 Downing Street and be received and thanked for your services to education. I've turned around St Jude's. It was placed in special measures, and in 2017, it came out in the top 20% of highest performing primary schools in England. I was also chair of governors for the past 2 years to support St Peter's Collegiate Secondary School in Wolverhampton during their troubled times. And that has been a positive experience for the staff, the governors and the young people of that school. As Evelyn said earlier, I was an Ofsted inspector for 7 years, and that took me up and down the country, Birmingham, London boroughs, Oxfordshire, Leicestershire, Milton Keynes, Shropshire, Staffordshire, and I can honestly say the education we offer in Wolverhampton is probably the best compared to some of those boroughs. I hope they're listening. As a leader, I've got to ensure that there's a standard of education for all young people, and we never ever compromise the quality of our children's education. And no excuses are made when adults are not good enough to serve our young people. And we don't make excuses for our children either. It's our job to remove the barriers. It's not the children's fault. It's our job. Our job to remove the barriers. Education is for all, irrespective of gender, race, culture, and socio-economic circumstances. Our children in Wolverhampton should compete with every other child in England. Our black children in Wolverhampton should compete on the same playing field as every other child in England. And I really believe in that. Just to demonstrate the diversity of the young people we serve, I've just got a video clip that just showcases the 2 schools I serve. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Laura. I think the volume was a little bit distorted on that, but never mind. It just encapsulates our children of Wolverhampton. Now, some of the challenges I've had to face, I started off, I went to Sunderland University as a trainee teacher some 27 plus years ago. And my teaching practice was all over the Northeast, County Durham, Newcastle upon Tyne, Washington. And that took me to some very, very interesting places. Back then, the only black person they'd ever met was Floella Benjamin on the BBC. I was the first black person that would go into schools as a trainee teacher. I was the first black person children had ever met in some of those schools in the Northeast. I was the first black person some of the families had ever met in the Northeast. And actually, it's the first time leaving sunny Wolverhampton and going off to university, I realised that there was a world out there, and there was a world that you could encounter racism and prejudice. Because living in Wolverhampton up until that point, I didn't experience that. Suddenly, when you're launched into a very white environment, you're very much aware of how different you are. The challenges I overcame were the fact that, yeah, I was a novelty, walked into schools, children looked at me, staff looked at me. But what overcame all of those barriers was the fact that as a young student teacher 27 years ago, my lessons were fun, engaging, interesting, exciting. I'd go into different schools on teaching practice, and straight away, my maiden name then was Miss Smith. Are we having Miss Smith? Are we having Miss Smith? There was excitement, and that was created by the practice, the education, the excitement, the motivation of young people in a very distinct part of our world. I was once called into a head teacher's office during one of my teaching practice days in the Northeast. Now this, remember, is 27 years ago. And it was, even back then, quite a very, very basic organisation, and very, very traditional. I was called into his office. You could only enter his office when a light flashed green to say you could enter. And I walked in, I thought, right, okay, here we go. What's he going to say? What's he going to do? He told me off for that the children in my class were far too excited and I should not wear trousers in his school. Trousers on females were not encouraged. There are so many barriers over the past 27 years that you think, that doesn't knock you back. That is a man in an environment over nearly 30 years ago who was very stereotypical. And I was very, very different. That didn't stop my practice, my motivation, my excitement for children. And also, I just said, well, I am on teaching practice. I'm not a teacher in your school. So sometimes you choose your battles, you choose your moments, and you choose your fights. But it hasn't deterred me for my success. Other experiences were that, you know, the children had never met anyone like me. In one school I went into, there was a science project, and the children were asked to do a poster to show an example of the experiment. It was fascinating. One of the mums asked if she could see me before the start of the school day. And I went out to meet this parent, and she said, he's drawn a picture of you in his science experiment, and I've told him not to. And I said, why? What have you told him not to do? He's coloured you in brown, miss. And I turned to the parent. I said, but I am. Oh, you sure you don't mind? No, I am brown. So that is just an example of the journey through education, that sometimes the barriers are there, or the lack of understanding is there. There's a mom thinking that her son has done something wrong by showing a big brown teacher in his science investigation, and she thought, well, you shouldn't be doing that. And it's just like, Mom, to the white mom, I am brown. You know, it is fine. You know, leave your child to be. So there are so many examples, and sometimes it is stereotypes and little barriers that you have to overcome. And many a time I've gone into meetings or travelled with white counterparts, and sorry, I'm in school, and that's the school bell. Just stop in a minute. And often they would speak to either person. If I was flanked by two white counterparts, questions would be directed to them. If I was on my own, I'd be told to wait. And one interesting experience, not too far from here, within the Midlands, was when I was doing an Ofsted inspection. A very elderly school secretary asked me to wait on the chair, said she'd deal with me in a minute. After half an hour, she still didn't deal with me. And then I said to her, who is it you're waiting for? Well, we're waiting for a very important person. She's called Denise Dalton, and she's an Ofsted inspector. I had to point out, that's me. Now, sometimes that could have gone two ways. This lady was mortified. She was embarrassed. And for one moment, she didn't expect that I was going to be the Ofsted inspector, black female. All I did was ease her embarrassment and say, never mind, just show me where the room is and I'll join the team. She didn't have to say anything. I didn't have to say anything. But you could clearly see that she was more embarrassed than I was. Those stereotypes that I was the last person walking into that school that morning, she expected to be a school inspector. As a head teacher, sometimes you've met battles and conversations. Sometimes the family would accuse me of siding with the black family if there's an altercation between children. Sometimes the black families would accuse me of not siding with them because I should know what it feels like to be black, and it's not fair. As a black leader, I've had elements of that, not many though, from both sides of our communities. 3 years ago, in our Black History Month at school, the children were depicting their role models. And as I was in one of the classrooms, one of the teachers said to the children, oh, you know, what about Mrs. Dalton as a role model for Black history? The child replied, Mrs. Dalton, she's our head teacher. Her job is to educate us and keep us safe. Oh, I said, as I left the room, I'm not going to be up on the board next to Michelle Obama today, am I? Now, sometimes it's how children see us and it's how we are depicted. That child didn't see me as a role model. That child saw me as, I'm her head teacher. I am, you know, here to educate, make sure she has a good education and to keep her safe. And it's fascinating, really, how we don't sometimes listen to what children say. Sometimes our messages can be subliminal. They don't have to be too controversial, and they don't have to be pushing messages to people who don't understand them. There are a lot of different ways we can address and look at some of the stereotypes. Other things I've challenged in my education are in Staffordshire, when I had teachers doing an educational prospectus, I've said in the past, why are there just blonde-haired white children on that prospectus? They are absolutely amazed and stop and think, I never thought. And I go, well, perhaps you should. We need to reflect all children on a school prospectus. When I first came to St. Jude, the first music concert, absolutely brilliant. Can't doubt the talent of the young people. But the large majority of children playing musical instruments were white children. And they were playing the flute, violin, clarinet. Yet it didn't represent the community we serve and the children within the school. I carried out a questionnaire and soon found out there were other things that our children wanted to play. So now our children play drums, they play bass guitar, as well as the violin, the flute and the clarinet. So it's representing what the children want, what the children believe in, and what the children are interested in. And sometimes we don't listen to our children enough. Moving forward in future years, and I know it's very easy to say things like hearts and minds, but it is. There are so many barriers in our organisations, in our communities and within our infrastructure. And it will continue to take time, patience and partnerships with our stakeholders to support our young people. We often tell them what they can't do. Perhaps we need to tell them what they can do. We need to involve a cross-population in some of the decisions we make for young people. Parents, carers, grandparents. It's around the age of 12 where our young children are starting to go through that progress in education. They're starting to test the barriers, and they are the most vulnerable from that age, 12 to 18. And it's at that age, a lot of their parents start to go back to the workplace. They're starting to take up full-time employment. And it's at that age, we need to ask ourselves, well, what are they doing? I've dropped my child off, or I've left the house before my child's gone to school. I come home and it's late in the evening. What has my child done? Where has my child been? It's some of those questions we need to ask ourselves at those particular vulnerable ages where they've gone through identity, self-expression, puberty. They've got the media at their fingertips and they can access so many other opportunities. You know, I've got 2 boys myself, so I've been on that journey with them. And it's a time when they move from listening to pop boy bands to gangster rap, and they discover Nike trainers and Jordan Airs. They just change and grow and move into a different culture. There's nothing wrong with that though. There's nothing wrong with embracing their self-expression, their identity, their tastes. But what we've got to do is actually support them. What else can they do? Young people change and develop, but do our systems change and develop with them? Are we still sometimes preaching systems that are very traditional, old-fashioned, and don't fit anymore? They don't fit the young people that we come into contact with. We portray all the things that young people shouldn't do. We say that they should enter gangs. We do projects. We bring people in to talk to them. Knife crime, drugs, about their sexual behaviour. These are all the things we tell young people not to do. Why can't we portray what they can do? Why can't we portray that we can liberate them, that we can shape them, advise them, support them? From that point on, young people are told all the things that they can't do. They're told that academically you need to do this, that, your grades aren't good enough. How about giving them a forum where they can say what they can do? What are the steps to take if you want to go to university? What are the steps to take if you want an apprenticeship? What are the steps to take if you want to go to college? Sometimes we underestimate our young people, and for the future years we need to start telling them what they can do and not what they can't do. Leadership is about having a vision, and it's about having a passion, and it's about making a difference. I think those are my main points.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Denise. We've got some questions coming through. Right, so one of the questions is, does unconscious bias exist in schools, and how would you go about challenging this? How much Black history is taught within the schools?
Yeah, I believe Michelle said this at the very start. She said some people don't do it because it's for the month. We do it. You recognise differences every day in every way. It's not just for a month. It's we have a focus for Black History Month, but there is unconscious bias. I mentioned it about the head teacher who had all white children on the school brochure. And I just said, really? It's about just saying, look around the school. Is it representative of our young people? When it comes to the nativity, how many times is the wise men from the east? I was a wise man from the east once in the nativity because I was very articulate and I could read a big script. I go to teachers, the wise man from the east is always the most articulate Black person.
Right.
We need to think about that sometimes. We need to think about, actually, as teachers, sometimes we are perpetuating some of those biases. Within the curriculum, we make sure that it's diverse. We have representation of different authors from different genres, and a child in their journey through education will come across lots of different authors from lots of different cultures as well. I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm. Another question we've got, growing up in school, Black history was never a topic covered. Is it something that teachers can put on the curriculum, or do you have to follow a standard guide to speak? Also, is the teaching of adults is this something that you still find difficult?
It's what people's understanding is of Black history, because over the years we've changed it. You can shape any curriculum any way you want. A few years ago we didn't do traditional Black history, so for people from history we did actually, it's about role models, your families. That was our focus for Black history. Go and interview your grandma, go and interview your granddad, go and interview next door neighbours, go and interview people from your church. That became our focus. You can take whatever feature and slant you can and you feel is appropriate, like you can within anything else in the curriculum. It's about ensuring that it's enjoyable, the children get something from it, and the children understand it and understand what the purpose is to it. But I think, as Michelle said earlier, it shouldn't be a bolt-on. It shouldn't just be in the month of October or November as a focus week. It's an everyday feature. And whether we do it overtly or discreetly, it's about ensuring that any challenges to how children are taught are done appropriately and representing a diverse community.
Right, thank you. Michelle, I don't know whether you want to...
Thanks for that, Denise. I found your chat very fascinating. We've got a couple more questions. It says, do you have an explanation as to why Wolverhampton schools are so diverse, but when it comes to sitting the 11 plus, it's not representative?
It is in my schools.
But with regards to the non-representative ones, what would you say is the issue there?
It's about informing parents. It's about informing parents about their opportunities. For example, what we do, say October the 31st, parents have to have their information submitted of where they want to go. So what we do in March, we have a showcase of where we invite as many schools into a meeting, a parents' information meeting, and the different schools in Wolverhampton have their stalls and tell parents, but then I tell parents about the selected places, and I tell parents about what they have to do. And I tell parents that as a mum myself, my two children, one went to a selected school and the other one didn't. And these are the things you need to do. So I share my knowledge and my experience of what I had to go through as a mom, as a parent, and as a teacher with our communities. It is underrepresentative in the Black community. But believe you me, in the schools I represent, we do direct some of our brighter children most able children who you know will actually achieve those tests results, we do direct them towards those selected places.
Okay. Another question. Within within your school of governance, within your school of governance, how reflective your board members in terms of its representation, and how do they make themselves to pupils and parents roles? I'm just trying to read the question. I think what they're trying to say is that how reflective is your board, you know, your governing board within the school, and how how visible are they to parents themselves?
The role of governance is very different because we're in an academy, so we're operated by a trust board which is through Lichfield Diocese. Now, before we became an academy, the governors, you have parent governors who are elected, if you like, to represent the parents, but in an academy you become a local trust board. Both schools, the trust boards, are represented by people from other ethnicities. I can honestly say that. And I also said earlier that I was the chair of governor at St. Peter's Collegiate in Wolverhampton. So governing bodies so far in Wolverhampton, to my experience, are very representative. I was also asked, actually, and for nearly 2 years, I was on a governing body in Staffordshire as well, because I felt, A, they needed challenge, and B, they weren't reflective and representative. So it was a positive choice. It was a school I did work at years ago, but they made that positive choice that they wanted greater representation on their governing body.
Okay, so how important would you say then to have a very reflective board within any organisation?
The teaching staff have got to reflect your children.
Okay.
The governing body has got to reflect your community. So basically, St. Jude's and Trinity, between the two schools, there are 41 home languages. My governing body, the staff, they have to reflect that as well. There's no point having an all-white governing body because that's not reflecting the children or the community that we serve. It's got to, in any organisation that you serve, I don't want to say the hierarchy, but the structure has got to represent the community. And I can say that in both schools, the staff and the governors are reflective of the community we serve. And I think that's really important.
What would the danger be then, Denise, if it wasn't reflective, would you say?
Lack of understanding. Mm-hmm. I think if it wasn't reflective of the children we serve, then what are you bringing to the table? Because we are all different. I don't want a room full of me, and I don't want a room full of you, Michelle, but what we've got to have in a room are males, females, people from different backgrounds, people who can all bring a different viewpoint. Because as I said earlier, how are we going to support our children? Young people can't grow and develop. Our systems have to grow and develop, and our systems will grow and develop when we've got a representation of people who can bring something different.
Okay, thank you. Evelyn?
Right, just out of interest, what sort of things are the children being taught about Black History Month, about Black history over the years, and obviously with the Black Lives Matter movement, has the curriculum changed in that perspective going forward? Are there going to be changes to it? In terms of in response to the Black Lives Matter movement that occurred during lockdown for the two schools, so we ran a community project and family projects where children and families were asked to showcase what is good about them, mm-hmm. and their culture and their expectation, and we were quite sort of humbled by the community's response to it, the family's response to it, and that became a theme during the summer term second half, that there was an ongoing theme, and it was the Black Lives Matters theme, our Children's Lives Matters theme, and that was really well received in both communities. Sorry, what was the first part of your question? No, could you just give me an example of what they actually showcased about themselves, just as an example? So one young girl, her dad is Nigerian, her mom is from the Netherlands.
what she did was she did a plane, an airplane, and it's also, she charted it saying, my dad came from here, my mum came from here, and we ended up here in Wolverhampton with Marines, and this is me. I've got the best of so many cultures. So she almost did her own autobiography, really. Another family in Trinity, they did their family tree of their parents. It was all made out of woods and blocks, and then they put their grandparents on and where their grandparents came from. Another family did is it called the sort of, is it the bust of image of a beautiful sort of African sculpture, and in words were about how we need to live together and support one another. So it's not just about recognising what's going on in the media. It's about leaders and teachers recognising it every day, and that focus, and not putting it on as a bolt on in October and November. That showing that image of those children in primary school, we've got to ask ourselves, they're united, they're diverse, we operate, we are different, we are not the same. I don't want anyone to ever say we are all the same. We're not, actually, we're all very different. But what we've got to ask ourselves, when children are on that journey, what suddenly goes wrong? What suddenly goes wrong where they leave this world where stereotypes are challenged, there's education, parents are encouraged, parents are inclusive, parents are part of their education. Something between 12 and 18, something goes very wrong. And in the future, that is what we've got to address.
So that's primarily in when they go on to secondary school, would you say?
I have a question around that, Denise, because I can see you doing a lot at the junior school level, and you know, obviously once they leave your school, you know, it's 12 to 18. You mentioned those are the years where, you know, they're very impressionable and young people. There's hormonal changes. They're growing up. They're looking like proper men and women at this point, aren't they? And then you've mentioned things about, you know, they're starting to find their niche. They've moved from the fluffy, you know, My Little Pony, you know, trainers to, you know, your Nikes and your Jordanaires. They've changed music from pop to gangster rap. How do you think the high school affects how they can be themselves in that sense? Because I think from my experience and speaking to other black mums at school, sometimes high schools can thrash this out of kids, can't they? And, you know, I have to wonder at times, do you believe that maybe sometimes we demonise youth where we shouldn't? And how do we challenge that? Because obviously, again, we want to engage children. Are we at danger of disengaging them?
Absolutely, because suddenly around, especially when they leave Key Stage 3 and they enter in their GCSE level, they're suddenly, all people talk to them about is, are they going to get the grades or not? And actually, are they going to get the grades or not? It should be a social aspect. What house parties are you going to? Where are you going after school? And I know we're not saying teachers are parents. However, there's got to be a social bit to parent meetings. There's got to be more of a social bit to actually engaging with young people, that actually, if you've got period 2 to period 4 off, where are you? Have you gone round someone's house? What are you doing? So I think the challenge has to go back to secondary colleagues that actually, yeah, don't demonise them, let them express themselves. I'm shocked sometimes on a non-uniform day how many different things young people in secondary schools are not allowed to wear or express themselves in. Yet in primary, if it's a non-uniform dress down day, you express yourselves in any shape or form. So I do agree with you in that respect, Michelle, that what is wrong with young people expressing themselves more and more, and it's okay. It's okay, you know, you're going, you know, you're trying to find your identity, you're trying to find your fashion sense, you're listening to Tupac and deciding to play Tupac backwards. Yeah, I've gone through all of that with my own children. And actually, that is okay. It's not, we shouldn't demonize it. It's okay. We probably did a similar thing when we were their age. As I say, they change and develop. We need to change and develop and grow with them.
Evelyn?
Right, got another question here. Thank you for that, Denise. based on your life experiences, what advice would you or do you give to inspire aspiring young future Black leaders?
Funny that, Evelyn, I've been asked to do something for Wolverhampton University on leadership. So I'm still thinking about that because it's about leadership. And hopefully I've selected for goodness knows what reason, but it is, yeah, something I've got to do for Wolverhampton University is do a presentation on aspiring leadership and future Black leaders within the West Midlands. What would I say to them? Don't settle for second best. You have to have your shoulders back and you have to be better than everybody else. No one's made allowances for you. You've got the same grades, you've got the same ambition, you've got the same drive, and unleash with your mouth if necessary, but choose your battles.
Yeah.
Do you think they have to be better, or because you've said they have to be better than everybody else? Do you think that the challenge is a double challenge if you happen to be a Black or minority ethnic child in progressing and being a leader in society?
No, psychologically you have to be better. If over the years, Michelle, I've walked into an interview for headship, all white men, I'm the only woman, right? I'm the only woman and then the only Black woman. So my self-talk would be, I am better than them. So it's about your self-talk and seeing yourself that you're on paper, you're probably exactly the same. You've probably got the same degree, same GCSEs, A levels, but my self-talk would be, I am better. It's that confidence.
I think we had a discussion yesterday, didn't we, Evelyn, where we were talking about our self-imposed glass ceilings and our own, you know, when you're talking about self-fulfilling prophecy and things like that, that sometimes that we talk ourselves out of a good gig. And there's no way of, you know, you can put a lot on the organisation, but, you know, is there something that because your experience or the experience that you've had as your parents, that you don't believe that you can flourish or progress purely because of your upbringing? We've got a question here. If I'd like to ask, it says, most Black parents didn't have a good inclusive education, and it was full. As it was full with, you can't be pushed in areas less than areas. So when parents come to school, they have hang-ups about how you manage this and influence other schools. So, you know, I'm just trying to get a flavour. Do they feel that, you know, our own education is perhaps affecting our own children because we feel that we can't do it because it wasn't given to us when we was at school? Because we've got our own battles as parents ourselves, haven't we, really? How do we change that mindset for parents?
And I think it is supporting a parent. It's like I said earlier, one of your questions were, how come at the 11 plus, Black people are underrepresented. And I said that actually it's about what the school's doing to educate the parents. If we're having a workshop in March, parents don't have to select the place until October. So it goes back to schools have to support parents. Schools have to support parents that when your child gets to 16, why, okay, you didn't go to university, why can't your child go? Parents have to know the pathway that their child can take. And there's not enough. Too many times it's negative from secondary that they haven't done this, they haven't done their assignment. Actually show them the pathway that they can take. If you want to be a solicitor or a doctor or a lawyer or a fireman, whatever it is you want to be, no one is showing you the pathway. They are almost saying, well, you need these results. Actually, what else do I need? What is the experience I need? What can I do? Can I be a volunteer? What age is it? What age do I need to be before I can get paid Saturday work? What age is it that I can be if I want to join a youth organisation? Or what is free in Wolverhampton? We're not showing our young people all the other things that can help shape them. And we have to show our parents that as well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah, I agree.
Just another question from me, Denise. Obviously, you're head teacher within 2 schools, primary schools in Wolverhampton. What has been your challenges when you started those, you know, the role as a head teacher in terms of bringing that school up to a certain standard?
It's expectation, really. I think it's more so when I always say, it's very strange, I always say you have to put manners on your community, and that takes time. It probably took the first 2 years when I was at St Jude's, and by that I mean that actually, if you're upset, if there's an issue, how do you conduct yourself? How do you talk to another adult, and whatever background you're from? And then suddenly it gets around that, well, actually, they won't accept this. They won't accept someone shouting, someone making a lot of noise, someone being embarrassing. There's a rule of engagement. You can be upset, but actually do it in a dignified manner. And that takes time. And I think that's the hardest thing is your expectation, letting the community know that don't shout in my face, don't speak to me like that, because actually you're a role model. Going back to the parent and saying, you have just shouted at me in front of your child. You're a role model. How do you feel? And then it's funny what Michelle says. Often the response is, well, I had a terrible time at school. I don't want my child to have a terrible time. And sometimes the parents are almost afraid that their child's going to perpetuate how it was for them at school.
Yeah.
And it's getting that, the mindset that actually it's a different time. You know, the teachers who taught you are no longer in the building or whatever else. And so people have got this hang up that it's still the same as it was in the 70s or the 80s or 90s for some of my young mums, that it is still the same, and people see education as they experience it through their eyes, sometimes not their children's eyes.
So they need to move on, definitely.
Just a question, it's probably not related directly to this chat, but obviously we know that there's quite a lot going on with is it Marcus Rashford and you know, trying to get free school vouchers and free school meals for children. What's your experience working as a head teacher in the schools in terms of those children that are struggling, and you know, can you give us any stories about how much this is actually really needed?
During the lockdown in March was one of the most challenging times of my career. The food source, when we were told to provide lunches for children, the food chain dried up. Companies stopped delivering because pubs were closed. So our supplies are all the same. Hotels, pubs, schools, they're all the same food supply chain. And literally overnight, you've been told one thing to do by the government, but the food chain dried up. And that was, you know, you've got a community you've got to serve, but where can you get the food order and the stock from, and particularly fresh goods? That was really, really difficult. And actually, Marcus Rashford is talking about children on free school meals during lockdown, and currently we are seeing parents who, both parents are being furloughed, they've been made redundant. There are families who actually, they might have worked, and you've got to wait 6 or 8 weeks to be entitled to free school meals. So there are families out there that are suffering. Free school meal families have got a provision of universal credit, but we've also got another group now that is emerging where perhaps only one parent works, or that parent's no longer working because they're in hospitality, they're not working. It takes weeks for their claim to come through. So we've got quite a part of our community that has been overlooked, and it's those parents who perhaps they work 20 hours in a care home, so they're not entitled to so many things, because if you only work 16 hours you're entitled to so many benefits, but if you work 20 you're not. They could be furloughed, then they've got to apply. So it's those families that we still need to support and target. People are making decisions, and people are making decisions very at the last minute. I just wish that someone will inform us very soon, actually, do we have to provide meals or vouchers for Christmas? Because that doesn't happen overnight.
It's about forward planning, isn't it, really? Let me know what I'll be doing in 6 weeks' time, as opposed to the day that it's happening.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. We got another question, Denise. Thanks, Esther, for your. Esther said that you answered her question really well. Thanks. And she said, yeah, we need to, encourage teachers to not let, hang-ups about parents' hang-ups about what their education affect their children's future. I think there's an issue there, isn't there? What else have we got here? On school meals, do you and are you able to have a diverse menu to open children's eyes as to that massive part of their culture?
Yeah.
Are they having ackee and saltfish on the menu? Right, dumplings, come on. Let's wave the flag for jerk chicken.
We have jerk chicken, and we have curry, and we have koftas, and we offer a very diverse, Wolverhampton City Council won't thank me for this, but we do offer a very diverse menu. When we first introduced the menu a few years ago, some of my young black boys in the school say, my mom says we can't have the chicken because white people don't wash the chicken. Yeah.
I think we all grew up with that one, didn't we?
Yeah.
And then you would wash the chicken to death, and then you'd add lemon juice, and then that thing before.
The stereotypes work on both sides, but we do offer a diverse menu that reflects our children. And the one thing, this was pre-COVID, every other year we had a carnival at St. Jude's, and it was one of the most amazing occasions where we host for the whole day. My different communities come together and prepare food. So we do have dumpling and fried chicken, and we have my Eastern European parents contributed last time. We had my Pakistani parents contributed. You basically could come to St. Jude's on our carnival day and you would eat around the world.
Talking about Eastern Europeans, there's a question here that House 1766 has posed. This is where we don't know the names of the people. Knowing the mix of children at Trinity, do you see a difference in inclusion hurdles between Black and Asian children and white Eastern European children? Do these different hurdles reflect your own and maybe your parents' barriers to inclusion? Because obviously we've got like new migrant societies now, haven't we? Which is the new blacks. When our parents came to the country, we've got a new wave of a diverse group, and they've got their own racism or discrimination in their own ways. Are you noticing any difference with regards to that community over the recent years?
Not at the moment, because it's a celebration, isn't it? It's a celebration that we are different, and there's a map in the school hall, and it just shows where, as I said, there's 41 languages at Trinity, and it depicts where those languages come from and where the children come from. So actually it's about sharing. There are different communities now. In Trinity, the highest non-white community are my Eastern Europeans, and in St. Jude's it is still my highest community outside whites are still my Asian community. So it's about sharing, recognising, looking at your statistics, looking at your communities, and making sure we are inclusive.
Absolutely. Evelyn?
Brilliant. No, that's excellent, Denise. I'm just thinking we've got just a couple more minutes to go. So in terms of working at Trinity, I know with the different cultures, since you started working within that school, what's the Ofsted report? Where are they in terms of performance? Yeah.
Yeah. At the moment, they became an academy in May 2019. So as yet, they haven't had their Ofsted inspection. They were judged good, and hopefully they'll continue to be judged good or better when we're inspected. But again, in that community, it's about actually making sure that we are clear role models. When I got to that school, after the first 2 days, I made an observation that why are my black males wearing tracksuits and your white counterparts aren't? And they looked at me and they said, oh, no one's ever pointed that out before. I said, well, I am actually. You know, why are all the black males in tracksuits and the white counterparts are not? Have I missed something? So sometimes it's choosing your battles, Evelyn. Think like, well, why aren't you in a shirt or tie? Why are you in a tracksuit if it's not PE day? And actually, we are role models, whether we like it or not, day in, day out. And the difference suddenly having a dress code or an expectation makes in a community, what other the community said, oh my gosh, look at the staff, don't they look smart now?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, actually. And I agree with you totally there. Just another question on that. You know, you mentioned about this, obviously, quite a diverse culture within that particular school and over 40 different spoken languages. How do you deal with the language barrier, particularly if someone's recently come into the country and started within that school?
Because we've got the population on a school database, it seems, what we do, you have an ambassador. So, for example, it could be you've arrived from France, you speak French, or you're Black Nigerian, but you only speak French speaking. I would link you in, or the staff would link you in with a family.
Right, okay.
And it's amazing, by a couple of weeks, you suddenly find families finding other families. And sometimes you have a population where you might have just had one, in 2 years' time, you might have 4, and they all know each other. Whether they travel as a group or word of mouth, but usually they're not in isolation. If we haven't linked them in, they soon link in within their community.
Yeah, I think that's accurate, because I manage the Heathtown area, and we do have obviously you've mentioned 40 languages in your school. I think our residents, we've got more languages than tenants, and they do like to travel as a community. And people would say that there's no need for housing because nobody wants to move to Heathtown. We would beg to differ, because we do have people applying to be within their communities. Just a question, I know we've sort of got a couple of minutes, and we asked this of the last speaker. What 3 or 5 things would you expect organisations or institutions, education is an institution, the police is an institution, local authority places are institutions, what would you expect them to have in place to make their places of work very inclusive? And whether we can adapt or adopt some of the things that you've got in your schools, are they transferable? Leadership is leadership, isn't it, really? So what would you say that needs to be in place?
I think what needs to be in place are people who get it. Over the years, I've been on boards, or I've been in organisations, and I know before Keith Island left Wolverhampton City Council, he asked me to sit on a few boards with him. And in organisations, you need the person at the top to get it, because sometimes they don't. And if they don't get it, so first and foremost, it's the top honcho. If they don't get it, you haven't got a hope in hell. You can surround yourself with many good people, but if the top person doesn't get it, and sometimes your job is if they don't get it and you do, you've got to start chipping away at them. You've got to start chipping away, and you've got to be resilient. So the skills that are transferable are resilience, challenge, appropriate challenge, and ensuring that the person at the top does get it. And if they don't get it, they put their hand up and they look to others for that support. Because it is hard to be a leader, but there are leaders out there. And I hate to say it, and I know it's 2021? What year is it?
Nearly, not there yet.
2020, sorry. Wishful thinking. Oh yeah, I wish this was a year away, believe you me. But there's still a lot of hierarchical positions are occupied by very traditional people still. And that's got to change. That's got to change because, yes, we all look at budgets and we look at finance and we look at costs, but we need people at the top to look at people.
Okay.
So we've got to have that human touch, not just boardroom, not just, you know, give me my papers before I walk in. There's got to be something about knowing your community or having good people to feed in that information. So, and all of those skills are transferable, but actually high expectation and standards, and do not compromise them by any means. I know years ago, it'll be interesting to see what that policeman says in his talk. I know years ago there was a recruitment drive in the police force and in lots of colleges and recruitment to sort of lower the standard for education, to allow Black and ethnic minorities to have a better access to opportunity. No, that is not the way. You know, in terms of education, we need to hold our own and be accountable.
And I think you're right. People don't want to be seen to be getting an opportunity purely to be hitting that quota. And I think that's something that's been said before in some of the chats that we've had. And obviously, we certainly, that's not the direction that we're going. It's 12:01. I would like to personally thank you for your feedback. It's been absolutely fascinating. I've loved hearing the discussion, and I could go on for the next couple of hours. But I'm sure your dinner bell's going to be going soon at school.
It's half term, ladies.
God, it is, isn't it? This is what happens when your kids are no longer at school. You lose track of time. Well, it's an opportunity to catch up on some marking then. So thank you from me, and I'm sure Evelyn has got some words to close out with. Thank you, Denise.
I just wanted to thank you, Denise. Thank you once again very much for taking the time out from your busy schedule to be with us here today. It has been a very fascinating chat. I'd like to wish you every success in the future. So, hopefully we'll have you back at some point. We'd love to have you back at some point, actually. So you take care and stay safe. So just for the audience, please join me a bit later on at 2 o'clock, where we'll be talking to Ni Anubi. He's the Regional Business Development Manager for a company called Engie, who are currently developing homes in Heath Town. So he's going to be on at 2 o'clock till 3 this afternoon. Once again, Denise, thank you so much. You take care and stay safe.
Thank you. You take care.
Thanks, everybody. Bye. And have a great day. Bye.